What's up, friends? Today I'm excited to share with you a simple counter to the Sicilian Defense, which arises after you play pawn e4 and your opponent responds with pawn to c5. The problem with Sicilian Defense is that it's one of the most complicated chess openings. There are something like 10 main systems for you to learn if you were to play the main lines. And that's why students often ask me how to counter that in a simple way without memorizing ton of variations. So that's exactly what we're gonna cover today. What I suggest is you play simple moves, and after knight f3, knight c6, you play bishop c4. You're kind of playing the Italian game regardless of the fact that your opponent has played this first move pawn c5 instead of pawn to e5. And while it may look a bit strange at first, in fact this system may be a dangerous weapon if you know how to play properly, and that's exactly what we're going to discuss today. Another beauty of this setup is that you can use it against any kind of Sicilian, so you don't really care if your opponent were going to play the dragon, the Najdorf, whatever, you're going to play the same setup and that's it. Now, in most cases, your opponents will play pawn to e6, and in this case, I suggest that you simply castle. Again, you play very simple chess, and your opponent will be tempted to play pawn to d5 to gain an extra tempo attacking this bishop. And while indeed Black gets this extra tempo, there is also a downside of this move. Black actually weakens their position, which typically they don't do in the Sicilian Defense. In the Sicilian Defense, thanks to these pawns, they're keen, and overall their position is usually very well defended. But now after a pawn to d5, it's a lot more extended, and therefore it also gives you more chances to attack Black later. What I recommend here is another tricky move, bishop to b5, instead of taking on d5 right away. So here what you're doing is you bait Black either to take over here on e4, which seems to be winning a pawn for Black, or playing bishop d7, which is another really common reaction of Black when you're trying to pin the knight to the king. They want to neutralize it by interposing their bishop like this. In fact, it's the most played move in this position. And in both cases, you actually have a pretty good attacking position. Now, as you trade on d5 and then go pawn to d4, challenging their center, you can see that Black has some weaknesses in this position that you can exploit. First off, there is clearly this king, which is still centralized, and you can take advantage of that and attack it. Secondly, these pawns in the middle of the board are somewhat shaky, especially these pawn on d5. It's not defended, and you can go knight c3 and hit it this way with your knight. Also, your queen from d1 is x-raying the pawn just as well after this potential exchange, and actually the position is already very uncomfortable for Black. You combine threats to this pawn on d5 to threats to his king along the e-file, and Black is likely to lose one of them, at least that pawn, which is already something. Now, sometimes your opponents will play move pawn to a6, trying to push your bishop away, which is another waste of time, because with this centralized king, it's dangerous to play moves on the queen side instead of, developing these forces. But nevertheless, many of your opponents will play it anyway, just because that's how they often react to your bishop on b5. They just dislike that you've got your piece on their half of the board. In this case, you're okay to trade this, and then you go rook e1, attacking the king. After bishop e7, you can already snatch the pawn on c5, and you can actually win a pawn that way, because notice that the bishop is pinned down to the king, and therefore it cannot move, cannot recapture the pawn, it has to cover the king. So after that, at least you're already up a pawn. And in one game, Black tried to kind of get it back and played queen a5, aiming to take it back that way, but White found a strong counter. He played queen to d4. I mean, usually in similar positions, you can go bishop e3 and defend a pawn that way and also secure your extra pawn. But in this case, what the player played queen d4 was even more ambitious, because besides defending this pawn, you also counter this pawn on g7. And as Black defended it, White played bishop g5, putting even more pressure along this e-file and along this diagonal. Also notice that Black can't easily castle, because if they move their king away, they're gonna drop the bishop on e7. In the game, Black tried something like queen a4. By the way, notice that they can never take here, because after recapture, the bishop is pinned, right? So they would just lose the queen for nothing. Let's take it back. In the game, they played queen a4, trying to somehow escape to an endgame, but White finished it off with bishop takes f6. Pretty cool. The bishop is pinned, therefore Black has to recapture that way, and now queen takes f6 attacks a whole lot. The bishop is still pinned down to the king, therefore it can't move, and White is threatening to capture either the rook on h8 or the bishop on e7 and to checkmate Black, and this is completely winning for White. Okay, let's go over the second main line here. Still, we're playing bishop c4. After that, you just castle. Like, again, beauty of this line, you don't have to know any theory, basically. I'm sharing with you some ideas just so that you know how you can develop your attack, but basically, you just develop your pieces normally. And here after d5, that's the only little nuance that you gotta pay attention to. Do not automatically take here. It is possible, it's not a big sin if you do that, but bishop b5, in my opinion, proves better results. And if black is seduced to capture your pawn on e4, you can continue with knight to e5, putting even more pressure to this pinned knight on c6. This time you're attacking it twice with your knight and bishop. And as black covers the pin, you can then trade on c6 and completely ruin his pawn structure. So if you start with bishop takes c6, and after that, if he wants to take with the bishop, that's fine, you still trade. And now just look at this. All these pawns is a mess, and you can attack it easily. You can play, let's say, knight c3, just trying to take this pawn back, and you will probably take it back. If black tries to defend it, you just attack it once again. Now you have two attackers. If black insists on defending it, you can still play queen e2 and overpower black. Black can't provide more defense to this pawn, and on the next move you will inevitably finally get it back. And as a result of this mass trade on e4, black is left with these weak pawns on the queen side, which you can easily attack. You can play bishop e3 or maybe b3 and bishop a3. That way you can go rook c4, you can bring the other rook and just start collecting all these weak pawns of black. So it's a simple line. Yes, you don't checkmate black, but on the other hand, black's players who are playing the Sicilian defense are typically aggressive. They want to attack you, and now you force them to play this passive position where they're doomed to defend and probably to lose. Sometimes in these positions, your opponents will play pawn a6, inviting you to capture on c6. In this case, you certainly should. You destroy their pawn structure, creating these weaknesses, and the only thing you should not do this is not to take on d5, because I see a lot of players are doing that, which is a horrible positional decision, because in this case you actually repair their pawn structure. So this exchange would allow black to have a really strong center and nice game. You don't want that. These weaknesses are one of the main problems of black's position. You just want to maintain them. So simply develop, play knight c3, pawn d3, and just develop. If they go d4, cool. Your knight from a4 will actually put nice pressure to this pawn. If they go knight f6, attacking it, you just develop in a simple fashion, and in the middle game you'll be able to take aim at these pawns, maybe even right now with this knight from here, maybe with b3 and bishop a3 attacking the other one from here, and you're probably having a strategically winning position already. Finally, you couldn't care less if your opponent wanted to play any other system of the Sicilian defense. If let's say they play the Najdorf variation or the Dragon variation, and they start off with d6, you can still go bishop c4, and it leads to just a normal game of chess. Here, sometimes they may try to exploit this advanced position and unusual position of your bishop in the Sicilian defense, but there is no easy way for black to do so. If they try a6 and b5, you can easily shut it down by going a4 so that you control the square. They can't go b5 anymore, because in this case you take, and if they recapture, they are going to lose the rook on a8, therefore you shut it down completely. If they ever play d5, although at first it may seem like an attacking move, but down the road, this pawn on d5 is going to be weak. You'll play bishop g5 to put more pressure to this knight on f6, and indirectly this pawn on d5 is also under the fire of your forces. Therefore, although at first it looks like an active move of black, but in reality it often backfires and rather leads you to attacking this black center afterwards. Also, we're still hiring a general manager, and if you're interested in a remote job working with me and helping lots of chess fans all around the world, you may read the details in the description below the video and apply if you're interested. We're also paying a $250 referral bonus. In case you know somebody who might be interested in this position, please share it with them. Finally, if you missed my video about the Danish Gambit with a fantastic series of the oh my god moves coming in a row, check out it right here. Have a great rest of the day.